Hello, my name is Fox and you're watching Den of Fools. Let's jump right in. Today we are looking at the points changes released by GW on the 16th of October. Games Workshop have made some adjustments to the strongest and weakest factions, alongside some errata and FAQs. These have made some slight changes, such as the core rule errata, which has tweaked how surge moves work. In the short article they did state they will be making more changes, with a balanced data slate and more points adjustments at the end of the year. I would imagine this will be in December to go with the announced Deathwatch rules update. They did specifically mention changing Miracle Dice, Cult Ambush and the Space Marine Codex. We will focus on the points adjustments, as well as giving our win rate for the faction since the last balance update. Unfortunately, GW have not given their win rates this time out, so we can't compare them against our own. We also have the new Codex supplement for the Blood Angels, which has been given its points in this update. I won't be covering their points as they're being changed from the Codex rather than the last Minotaurum field manual. I do think they are looking good with the new rules and points, and I'm excited to see their initial win rate when the Codex starts seeing play. With that said, let's go through the factions alphabetically. The Adepta Sororitas see melee points increases for their units, which isn't too surprising considering they were one of the top factions with a win rate of 53.2% since the last balance update. They did get some minor buffs for the Battle Sisters and Zephyrim, but other than that they've got significant nerfs to some of their strongest units. In particular, the 30+% nerfs to the Dialogus and the Triumph of St. Catherine are very high, with the Triumph of St. Catherine now paying a very high premium for its Miracle Dice generation. The popular Bringers of Flame detachment has also been nerfed, with every available enhancement getting a points increase. The detachment will still be playable, and other ones might be preferred now. Overall, I still think they will be strong, but will definitely drop back a fair bit with the changes, as the nerf units were taken in nearly all of the top lists. GW themselves obviously think there is more work to be done, as they have stated they'll be addressing the way Miracle Dice work in the next update. It will certainly still be well within the Goldilocks zone, but it will be interesting to see how far down they go. The Custodes run a win rate of 47%, so a few buffs are not unwarranted. The buffs are small overall, with only 5 changes, and rather minor ones at that. Perhaps the most impactful will be the buff of the Virtus Praetors, but really I don't see the buffs having a massive impact on the Custodes win rate, and they will most likely stay in a very similar position. They may benefit from a few of the stronger factions getting nerfs to help their win rate increase by a small percentage. The Adeptus Mechanicus get a few changes to try and internally balance the Codex a bit. The strongest stuff has been nerfed, with the Iron Striders, Paraxi, and Vanguard all taking a hit. They have dished out more buffs to compensate, with the Electro and Tech Priests all getting a minor decrease. They did have a win rate of 48.5%, so we're pretty middle of the pack before the update. As GW has nerfed their strongest units, it'll be interesting to see if the buffs can make up for it. I would imagine they will drop a little bit or stay around the same level, but the changes should definitely help army variety in competitive play. The Aeldari are currently on a 48.1% win rate and get buffs for a lot of units. The Corsairs decrease some points, as well as the Falcon and Fire Prism. I think Aeldari players will certainly like the buff to the Fire Prism, which remains a very strong anti-tank choice. The Shining Spears also see a buff, alongside the Warlocks. I do think it is very interesting that GW buffed 5-man squads of Wraithguard and Wraithblades, while leaving the 10-man squads at the same cost. I would imagine this is because they were only ever taken in the bigger units, but I do think it is a little bit strange to do that. In any event, it's hard to see how the buffs won't help them, as they've not had any nerfs to go along with them. They're not super massive, so I would guess their win rate will only improve marginally. We do know that they will be one of the first factions getting a Codex in 2025, which will surely have a big impact for the faction. The Guard were doing well with a win rate of 50.5%, and have got some nerfs to combat the best lists. The Bulgrim were incredibly popular in top lists, with the 18 being taken regularly. They have received a big 22.2% nerf, so that list will stop seeing play. The Tank Commander has also taken a hit, with a nearly 10% rise, but they did get Squadron in the errata, which makes up for the increase. There have been a few buffs to try and assist the faction, with the Scout Sentinels nearly auto-include. The Heavy Weapon team buffs and Field Ordnance team buffs will be reasonably nice for the faction. GW haven't changed a huge amount here. We know they will be the first Codex of 2025. I would imagine the nerfs to the Bulgrim will severely impact their win rate, as the vast majority of the top competitive Guard list took 18 of them. I do think the nerf was needed to get some list variety, but there hasn't been a huge amount of buffs, so I think they'll drop back a fair bit. The Daemons run a win rate of 50.6% by our data, so are doing reasonably well. They have seen some very minor changes, with the Beast of Nurgle and Shalaxi Hellbane getting a buff. I'm sure Shalaxi will start seeing play again, considering they were very heavily nerfed last time. Overall, with such minor changes, I don't think there will be a massive impact on their win rate. Chaos Knights have a win rate of 45.7% on our stats, so it definitely needed some buffs. They have got some minor ones with a few points cuts for the Abominant, Desecrator and Despoiler. They also got a buff to the Warthog Brigand, Huntsman and Stalker. As the buffs are only small, I really can't see them having a massive impact on the Chaos Knights' overall win rate. Of course they will help a little bit, and it might allow players to get an extra ally or enhancement. Chaos Space Marines were on a win rate of 44.5%, and were one of the weaker factions despite getting a lot of wins at big GTs. A lot of that was down to spamming big squads of cultists, which explains the nerf to the Dark Commune and the Accursed Cultists. They have received a fair few buffs to compensate, which should help out their win rate. I do think it is a little bit strange that they have a lot of units where only the max or minimum squad get changed. GW have allowed some of the stratagems for Vassal's detachment to work on him, which should make him see more play alongside his buff. Overall, I would imagine their win rate will increase a bit, as it was already low, even with the big win potential, as most Chaos Space Marine players weren't taking a very competitive build, which focuses on the cultists. The Death Guard are on a win rate of 48.1%, and they've got some small buffs. Overall, I don't think they will have a big impact, however they were pretty middle of the pack anyway, so will likely remain there when the points changes start to see play. The Drukhari were on a win rate of 51.5%, which did fluctuate from week to week. Even so, they were one of the strongest factions in the game, ranking 4th on our win rates. They also usually do well in terms of winning tournaments, so we're not undue a nerf. GW also thought they were a little too strong, and has therefore hit the faction reasonably hard. The Archon has increased, as well as name characters Dressar and Hesperax. The Incubi have also got a significant increase to their points cost. The Hellions did get a buff, but overall, I think this will definitely bring their win rate down a fair bit, as some mainstay units have taken a sizable increase to their points. The Genestealers have a win rate of 48.9%, but have improved significantly over the last 4 weeks, where they had a 52.1% win rate. GW did call them out as needing help in the balance article, and have obliged with buffs to a lot of the core units. I'm sure Genestealer players will like these decreases, which I'm sure will help them out significantly. They should also expect some further changes in December update, when GW will look at changing Cult Ambush. The Grey Knights are on 48% by our stats, and GW have given them some minor buffs, with the Purgation Squad and the Terminators going down in points. I would imagine this will give them a small boost, but they will most likely remain at a similar level. The Imperial Knights are on a win rate of 51.9%, and have got some very minor buffs. They do perform much better at the smaller, more casual tournaments, which has propped up their win rate, but they were still significantly better than their Chaos counterparts. Given all the other changes, I would estimate they will remain around a 50% win rate. We had the Necrons on 49.6%, although they were routinely the second most played, which does bring the win rate closer to the 50% mark. GW have especially nerfed the Range Destroyers, which were very competitive units, especially in single or small squads, in the Hypergrid detachment. They have also given the biggest units, such as the Monolith and Tesseract Vault, an increase. GW has buffed some of the underused units, with the Triarch Praetorians getting a big 16% decrease. They did also buff the very popular Doomsday Arc, which will thus remain very popular. There were some keyword changes, which makes the Phalanx look a bit more tempting. Overall, I do think these changes are a nerf for the Necrons, and they'll most likely stay around the same level. One of the weakest factions at the moment, on a win rate of 43.9%, the Orks were certainly in need of some buffs. Well, it's all green, with a lot of units getting significant cuts. Both types of boys have gone down, which is good for the green tide. The Mega Knobs also look tempting again after their previous big nerf. The Kill Rig is looking very good at its new points cost. It is interesting to note that the Tank Busters have got the biggest buff before their brand new units arrive in the next Kill Team expansion. They will certainly improve their win rate considerably, as they were one of the weakest factions. It will most likely push them into the mid-table, rather than right to the top. Talking about weak factions, we move on to Codex Space Marines. As everyone knows, the Codex has been performing very poorly, only managing a win rate of 39.1%, making them the worst faction in the game. GW have decided they will in fact punish them a bit more, with nerfs to some of the stronger units, such as the Apothecary Biologists and the Jump Pack Infantry. They have also nerfed some of the enhancements, which were being abused by the Divergent chapters, rather than Codex Space Marines itself. They have provided a fair few buffs. At least Fearless will be happy to see Gulliman get a big decrease. They also provided buffs to the units we're not seeing any play, although I do like the buff for the Storm Speeders and Ballistus. Unfortunately, overall, I think Codex Space Marines are still going to struggle, with none of the buff units really being a game changer in terms of increasing their strength in my opinion. It is a shame that players of the non-diversion chapters are going to have to wait till December, where GW have promised to make further changes to the codex with a rules update as well. As I've said previously, one of the ways to balance the codex against the divergent ones will be to give the codex chapters their own rules again, which can't simply be taken by the chapters who have more options. I do think this is incredibly unlikely, but personally I don't see how they're going to fix the issue otherwise, as any buff to Codex Space Marines is also a buff to the divergent chapters, which we will cover next. The Space Wolves are by far the strongest chapter, on a win rate of 52.8%, which also makes them one of the strongest factions overall. GW have made some significant changes to them, with their strongest unit, the Thunderwolf, getting a massive 20% increase. The Space Wolves were the only chapter really using the Stormlights task force, and all the reason the enhancements got changed when we looked at Codex Space Marines. They have also received a fair few buffs, which is a little surprising considering they were doing very well before. I suppose GW attempted to balance the index and make units other than the Thunderwolf Cavalry more appealing. Overall, I think the Space Wolves will have taken a big hit, as the Thunderwolf Cavalry were being spammed in max numbers in the most competitive lists. With the buffs to the other units, Space Wolf players will most likely be looking at options other than Stormlance, which I would imagine was the plan from GW. It'll be interesting to see if they can find another strong build without their cavalry to rely on. The Black Templars had a win rate of 49.2% before, and honestly seemed in a good position overall. Well, GW have decided to hit them rather hard, with nerfs to big Crusader squads as well as Grimalus and Helbrecht. Honestly, I am very surprised they've been this punitive to the Templars. They usually took armies which mainly focused on their own unique units, so we're not picking and choosing the best bits of Codex Space Marines like the other diversion chapters. They will lose a fair bit of strength after this update, and will unfortunately most likely be the weakest of the diversion chapters. The Dark Angels had a win rate of 48.1%, but could do very well with the right list. GW have decided to nerf some of their best options, such as the Deathwing Knights and Asriel, who actually still look very good for the points. They were using Gladius, and perhaps the main reason why Fire Discipline got nerfed. They get big buffs to other unique units, such as the Lion, which I'm sure Dark Angel players will like. Overall, I would say it's a slight buff for them, although their most competitive build will cost a few more points. The Tower on a win rate of 47.5% and have received buffs overall. Farsight is the only battlesuit to get a buff, with some small nerfs to the Piranhas and the Riptide. The biggest change is the buffs to all the Crew units, which is very much appreciated. I like the buffs to the Rampagers, who look good for all tower lists at that cost, and the Crew detachment will be far more appealing after the buffs. I think their win rate will increase a bit once these changes see play, as most other things have been left alone or have received a very small nerf. The Thousand Sons have been performing very well, with a win rate of 54.8%. In fact, they were the strongest army by our win rates. GW have nerfed them quite hard, with nearly anything which generates a Cabal point getting nerfed. This includes Ironman and Magnus, which have taken in nearly all top lists. They have slightly buffed the 10-man rubrics, but have nerfed the far more popular 5-man variant. Overall, these changes will have a big impact on their win rate, as they are all key units, with at least some of these being taken in every single Thousand Sons list. Their rules do heavily incentivize players to take a lot of sorcerers for the Cabal point generation, but I think players may feel a little hard done to, essentially being heavily punished for using the army rule. They were quite strong before, so some nerfs were warranted, but I think this will have a very big impact on their win rate. Tyranids run a win rate of 49%, although they have picked up some great wins at big tournaments. GW have seen fit to nerf some of the most competitive units, especially utility units like the Lictor and Pyrovore. They have provided some buffs to some of the least played units, but overall, the changes are rather minor, which means they should stay in a relatively similar position. We have the World Eaters on a win rate of 50.1%, and are just on the cusp of being one of the stronger factions. They have received some nerfs, with key units taking a hit. It isn't major overall, so I would imagine the same units will still be taken, and their win rate will remain quite similar because of this. We have covered a huge number of changes, with every faction getting some adjustments. There was a very small change with Imperial Agents, with the Seductor squad getting a nerf when not being taken in an Imperial Agents army. Votan also got some very minor changes, with the Jaegers getting a nerf alongside a small buff to the Half Guard. I would imagine they will remain around the 49% win rate they currently have. Overall, I think GW have done a decent job of balancing, other than the Space Marines, who have seemingly been given a light touch before proper adjustments in December. It does make me wonder why they didn't just change them now, but I guess we will have to wait and see what they do. Stay tuned for our weekly Zat shows, where we will cover the win rates for all factions. I am very excited to see how the new meta unfolds when we get the first win rates with the new points in the coming weeks. If you enjoyed our content, please subscribe, check out one of the videos on screen, and consider using our affiliate links in the description. Thank you for watching.